All right. So far we have looked at how to import data from different files. We looked at tab separated, pipe delimited, and so on. And once you import these data, right, before you can do any sort of manipulation, you will need to study the data types, study a little bit more about the data before you actually deep dive into analysis. Now, there are some inbuilt techniques that help you do so. So let's look at a few syntax that might be useful for you to do an initial scan of the data and analysis of the data before you actually go ahead and do some sort of manipulation. All right, so let's get started. So what I'm going to do is let me go ahead and just reuse the same file that we used so far. And this is our simple data. And what we are going to do right now is, let me just put a small header so that we can understand. So I'm going to just choose certain columns, right? So when you actually just display employee.head, it'll show you each and every column. But what we are going to do right now is we're going to see if there is a good way for us to just show a limited number of columns, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list. So, and I'm going to input the number of columns or the column names that I want to be displayed. So for example, I would like the name column to be displayed and maybe the position. Right, and what I'm going to do right now is I am going to do the same thing, right? Just call the read table. But here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say employee and then pass in the calls list, and I'm going to say just display that. So now you see that only 2 columns are being displayed, right? And if I just do a head, it is going to display, the first few rows, the first 5 rows. Okay. So simple stuff, because sometimes, when you actually import CSV, like I have personally seen that, especially the log files and stuff we import will have like 500, 600 columns of information in it. And technically you will not need everything, for your data analysis and stuff. So you might just need a certain number of columns, and this is one of the best way to filter that out and just show you more relevant columns that is useful for your analysis. Now, since we actually looked at how to choose certain number of columns, we should also look at the other way around, like how to choose certain number of rows. And it's kind of pretty much the same way that we do it. But what we're going to do is we're going to use certain attributes. So let me go ahead and show you. I'm going to use the same file. And what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to just say the number of rows equal to 4. Okay. And then let me just do something like this, employee.head, sorry, employee. And let's see how many rows are being returned. So there are 4 rows. Remember, I haven't used employee.head. All it did was that, it kind of imported only 4 rows. Now, the key reasoning behind this is that, again, it's the same concept, right? You basically data science and, all these algorithms would be applied to thousands and thousands of rows. And naturally, when you're doing some basic data cleaning and stuff like that, you would want to see a sample of data, sample of columns. And these are some of the techniques you can use, right? So if you were to import that entire thing on your screen every time, just imagine that if your file is around 1 GB or 10 GB, the amount of time it's just going to take just to download that data, put it into an object and stuff like that. So these type of techniques will really help you to kind of speed up your overall just data preparation before you do your analysis. Okay, so let me show you a few more techniques, which might be helpful. First and foremost is whenever you import data, the first challenge you're going to have is, what are the data types, right? So before you even start some analysis, you need to understand the data type. So let me say displaying data types. And again, it's quite simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to again use the same file. Okay. And actually, let me go ahead and import all the rows since we have limited set of rows, and I'm going to just say employee dot dtypes, and it's going to kind of show me all the data types of the different columns. So you see age would be an integer, others are all objects. So yeah, this is pretty interesting, and then again extending the same concept in which you have like 500 columns and you are just interested in some numerical columns initially. Maybe you are working towards some sort of regression algorithm or something like that. So you want to just look at all the integer data types, all the columns that are of integer data types, and that's also pretty simple, right? And you can extend the same concept for anything. So let me just make sure I spell that correctly. Okay, and the way that you kind of do that is you store it into employee, and then what you're going to do is you're going to, oh, by the way, I want to tell you one more thing. As soon as you press dot and press tab, you will get a number of options here that can help you code even faster. And what I'm going to do over here is I am going to use the select dtypes, right? And it requires certain parameters to be passed, and I'm going to say include the ones which is basically a number, right? So again, before I actually do that, what I need to do is I need to import the numpy, and then I'm going to use np dot number dtypes. It's pretty simple. Again, I would recommend you to kind of read a little bit about numpy arrays, and I'm happy to put a link as well. It's basically an n-dimensional array object. So it's basically useful in a lot of number capabilities, random number capabilities, and stuff like that. So I don't want to go too much in details, but what I'll do is I'll put a link for the numpy arrays and so some other material. But this is a way in which you could just choose all the columns where the data type is a number or an integer, right? And this is going to be very, very helpful for you during your initial data cleanup. Okay, so that was pretty interesting. So you might need a couple of other things before you actually start some data prep and data analysis. So one of the things that I generally start off is actually, let me show you this chapter number 4, and it's actually to describe what these different numerical values are. There will be certain columns which are pure integers, and using integers you can know things like, okay, overall given say 1,000 rows or 2,000 rows, what is the minimum, maximum, so you'll know the ranges, what is the count, what is the overall standard deviation, what is the mean or the average, things like that, right? So given a sample data set, you need to know a little bit about the numbers, right? You can't really just take that whole data, pass it on to an algorithm. So there are some inbuilt methods which will kind of help you do some data analysis. So let me go through that. So some inbuilt methods for data analysis. Okay, so let me go ahead and just since we have everything stored in the employee object, so I'm going to just say employee.describe. And this should give me, for the age, how many values are there? There are 57 values. What is the average age? It's 42 years. The overall standard deviation, the minimum, maximum, and so on and so forth. So this is pretty helpful. And again, if you have multiple integer columns, it will actually give you this information for all the integer columns. So that's kind of pretty helpful. We talked a little bit about the D types, right? So that is something you'll definitely use. The next one is if you want to kind of even get a feel of the total number of rows and the total number of columns, because essentially we haven't discussed that, right? So if you import a data, the first thing in SQL Server or anything that you see is how big is your data, right? So show me the number of rows and columns, and there's a very simple way to do that, right? It's called the shape. So employee.shape, and this just says that there are 6 columns and 57 rows in this whole data set. So some simple stuff, right? So these are some of the things you will do. Oh, the other thing is definitely when you imported it to this employee object, so what type of object it is, right? What is the type of the object? And that's pretty helpful. So if you just do type of employee, I'm pretty sure that should be a data frame. So it's a data frame object. So these are some of the things that I actually do whenever data is given to me, right? So you need to get it to a point where you actually have a little bit of a feel of data in terms of just simple stuff like columns, number of rows, what is the range of data, how many numbers are there, how many non-numbers are there. So these are a few things you would do. So the thought of actually running you through some of the examples. Now, I just wanted to put an open-ended question. So if you actually think there are, I'm sure you will, once you start practicing this, you will find a couple of other things that you will quite often do before you even start analysis. So I want you guys to actually think about a few other scenarios, where you would actually explore the data a little bit more. And if you find more, please post the code and some brief explanation in the Q&A section so that it will be useful for all. Okay, so those are the few things that I wanted to discuss. So taking all those concepts, we'll go to the next step. So see you in the next lecture. Hey, welcome to this chapter number 5. So you all have studied a little bit about, how to read the metadata, how to kind of explore just the data a little bit in terms of how big is the data, how many columns and rows are present, what is the minimum, maximum, and so on and so forth. Now, once you do this, and believe me, all this, you will spend a lot of time actually doing this before you even deep dive into data manipulation, cleaning, and all. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a little bit more deeper dive into this, and we're going to understand a few more concepts. And what I thought is that maybe many of you guys are already aware of these concepts in SQL, or have taken my SQL course also. So how about we actually try to compare it with what's in SQL, right? So in SQL queries, we can concatenate 2 columns or very simple things, right? We use a select query. We would just write some filtering statements like the where clause, or some sorting techniques like the order by and stuff like that, right? So keeping those concepts in mind, can we do the same thing in Python? And if so, how can we do it, right? So let's look at some simple examples. So first thing, what I'm going to do is let me go ahead and actually show you how to concatenate 2 columns. And the way you do it is, let's say, concatenating 2 columns. And the way that you do it is, we have to import the data for sure. So we have everything captured in our employee object, and what we're going to do now is take that data and actually create a new column, right? So what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and actually create a new column called employee, and let me call this as name salary, just to keep it simple. And all we are doing is nothing but we're taking the name column, and whatever is in the name column, we are just appending it with the salary. And mind you, all these are case sensitive, so if your S is small letters, and no, it won't work. So now once you do that, what you could do is you could run the employee.head, and then you find that these two are kind of appended together, right? So it's kind of sometimes these things are pretty helpful. common things you would sometimes find in customer data is there is a column called it's a salutation, Mr., Mrs., and stuff like that, and then there is a first name, last name, middle name. And for your model, maybe you don't really require that level of granularity. You would just concatenate about 5-6 columns and put it into one column. That makes your overall table a little bit more shorter in terms of just visibility. So the tools are available. I just wanted you guys to be aware of these tools a little bit as well. Okay, so technically this is like we added a column, right? Now if you were to remove a column, like actually you have too many columns and you want to remove a column, how do you do that? One is just definitely we saw in the last lecture where we just selected a few columns. That is definitely one. But if you want to permanently drop a column out of your data set, you could do that as well. And the way that you do that is basically, let's say it's called the drop method, and then you just pass in the column name which you want to drop, right? So for example, if I want to drop the office column, I would say just pass in the office column name, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say axis equal to 1. Now axis is a little bit confusing to understand initially, so for now just think of it as axis equal to axis 1 means it's columns. When I say axis 0, that means I'm referring to downwards, that is it's rows, right? So think of it that way. I'll put in a few more links or it's even available in the documentation section, but for now just remember it this way. And I'm going to say that do this in line, so in place equal to true. And once I do that, and if I just do employee.head, I should see that column vanish. So there's no more office column here. Pretty sleek stuff. So just so that I am working with the latest data, I will go ahead and just re-import the entire table again, so that I have the dropped column as well. All right, so we have everything now. So we looked at how to concatenate or add a new column, and then we looked at how to drop a column. So now let us go one step ahead and let's look at something new: how to rename columns, right? You will not always get your data in a format that you like, but you have the flexibility of renaming the columns and giving it a name which you actually like, right? And I'm going to show you how to do that. It's basically the same way we did last time. We created a list, and what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to just name, I'm going to create a set of columns with the revised names, right? So I would say that the name should remain the same. Say the position should remain the same. I'll just abbreviate the office to OFC, and then maybe age should be the same, and then I'll remove the space from start date, and then maybe salary I'll just call it SAL, right? Some simple stuff. And then what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to say that employee dot, again if I press tab it will give me a couple of options, and employee dot columns, I'm going to say use these columns, and it will remember the order, so you don't have to really worry about that. Now if I do employee dot head, it gives me an error. So let's see, where did I go wrong? Oops, it's not employee underscore calls because I just used the list name as COLS, so I passed in the same thing. Now let's try again. Now it has actually renamed it to OFC, removed the space, and so on and so forth, right? So again, there is one more. This is one more tool that you should add to your suite of tools that you would generally use even before you start with the overall data analysis part. Okay, let's look at some of the techniques which we would often use in SQL, and which is very easy to do in SQL, and it's equally easier to do here as well. So let me start with something simple. I'm going to say that initially let's go ahead and work with sorting your data, right? And this is like just like your order by clause. All right, so let us go ahead and sort this table by age, right? And how do you do that? It's actually very simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say employee dot and press tab, and there should be something called sort values. And the next thing what I need to do is I need to give it a couple of more information, like sorted by age, and then say ascending equal to false. That's it. So if I do that, I'd kind of get, you know, a sorted list. And if I do is maybe ascending equal to true, I start from 19, 20, and so on and so forth, right? It's a sorted table now. Let me just go ahead and just show you the first few rows, and this is how you would use the sorting techniques. So pretty straightforward stuff. Again, you could also just you know, sort a series, so it's actually pretty much the same. So let me show you that. So the way you do it is, again, you just use employee and then pass in the name of the column. I want to just kind of sort this one, name, over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press tab, let's see, sort underscore values, and they should give me a sorted list, sorted series. And again, I can just call the head, and it'll just give me the first few rows. So some useful tools over here. The second thing what you would need is probably some filtering techniques, right? So similar to the where clause that you use, you would need some sort of filtering techniques in your data preparation as well. So the way that you can do that, and this is just like a where clause, right? Let's just take a very simple example, right? So we have the age over here. Let us select all rows where let's throw out a number, age is less than 40. Simple stuff, right? And the way you do it is, again, you basically use your employee object where you have all the table downloaded, data table downloaded, and I'm going to just say employee dot, press space, and you should find age, oops, it's capitals AGE, less than 40, and it'll give me, you know, everything that's less than 40. And I can just call the head method and just display a few rows, right? So simple stuff. Now you can definitely extend that to, you know, multiple filtering criteria as well. Actually, let me just show you. Let me just show you something similar. So how do we actually do that, right? So we could actually use the same way. So let me go ahead and actually type it so that you can see that. So you can do employee, and then you have to give all your conditions in brackets, right? So you say that employee dot age should be less than 40. Let's throw in one more condition, right? So and say employee dot name. Oops, I didn't use a square round bracket, so let me make sure I use that correctly. And employee dot name should be equal to, let's just take this one, the first one, Ari Sato. Okay, and this is the way you can kind of deal with this. So, you know, once you press enter, you get that particular information. Okay, so let me just give it some comment. We call this as multi-filtering criteria. Okay, so we have some information over here. Again, you know, as we discussed in our previous lecture, where we need only certain columns to be shown, we can still extend that same concept where we just say, you know, calls equal to, and then give it a set of column names. I just need the name and maybe, you know, position. And then I can just say that, you know, with the filtering condition like employee, where employee dot age is less than 40. Just give me the ones in my list calls, right? So it'll actually give you that information. Somewhere I did some mistake. Let's see. Position in, oh yeah, let's try that one more time. And now you have 2 columns, right? And again, the same, I just like this head method so much that I use it because it just keeps the things a little bit more shorter, right? So we have gone through a couple of good examples here. You can definitely extend it. As a takeaway, as an exercise, I would like for you guys to read a little bit about how can you filter for rows where name is either Irie or Brent or Bruno. So basically, we're passing in 3 names with an OR clause. Try that out, post your code a little bit. I'm not going to give out answers just like that, but I'd like you guys to try it out once. Again, we looked at how to actually rename columns, but at times you might need to kind of convert your data types, right? Again, if you have any ideas around that, definitely paste your code. And then we actually passed in a list of column names where we wanted to replace and stuff, right? So we will be actually looking at some string manipulation techniques, but if you want to just do some pre-reading on, given that you have 500 or 1,000 columns, how would you rename it in one shot? Think about string manipulation functions, the string replace functions, and if you're able to figure it out, please paste your code. Again, or else we will be looking at some of the similar techniques in the coming lectures as well that may be helpful for you to solve this particular question. Hope you enjoyed that. We will look at some more concepts in the next lecture. Thank you.